Lightroom has some local adjustment tools where you can actually control different parts of the image independently. There's a brush tool, gradient tool, and radial gradient tool. Similar to Photoshop, the only difference is that Lightroom works from a raw file, not from a TIFF or PSD. So there's actually more information in that file. So I personally try to do as many adjustments as I can in Lightroom before I go to Photoshop. So let me show you how those work. So if you go to the Develop panel or hit D and click this brush panel in the top right, we're going to click Exposure and bring that down. So there's this box here called Auto Mask, and Lightroom's going to attempt to cut out the subject and just affect the backdrop. So we're going to start just painting in, and you can see it does a pretty good job of just selecting the backdrop. But as I zoom in, I can see there's, different errors. There's banding here and around his head. So there's actually another tool you can use, or adjustment on the brush tool, to fix this. So we're actually going to click Auto Mask Off, and we're going to go to Range Mask. We're going to go to Color. So this is going to just pick the color of the sky with this eyedropper and only select that color. So if I select that, you can see it did a much better job of cutting him out, but you still have banding here. But that's just because we didn't paint there. So if you go back to the brush, and just paint in, it actually fixes all those errors. So you can see this did a really good job of cutting everything out. And I'm actually going to finish this image with some more local adjustments. So I want to add some clarity to the sky to bring the clouds out and bring the exposure down a little more. And next I'm going to make a new brush. So if I click New, it's going to make a new brush. And this is almost like a new layer in Photoshop. So you can add multiple brushes or gradients and really make your image, what you want. So I actually want to bring the exposure of the grass down a little bit and the clarity. And remember, you can change all this stuff after the fact, so if it doesn't work quite right. So we're just going to paint in here. And you can see I'm overlapping his pants because I'm going to use the color tool. So if I go to color here and click this eyedropper and select some of the grass, you can actually pick multiple colors. So hold Shift down and select some of the shadows. And you can see it left his pants. So I can independently control the grass from him. So I'm going to bring that down a little and bring the clarity up. So now let's finish this image off. So I want to bring the highlights down a little bit, and I want to add some color toning. So we're going to use split toning and add some green in the shadows and some yellow in the highlights. And then move this balance to find the right tone. So I think there's a little bit too much green, so bring that down a little bit, and a little bit too much yellow. So I think we can add some blue to the shadows to really make this image to the next level. So we're going to go to the curves, go to blue, and pull this bottom point up a little bit. And actually I like that really well, but I want to see what it looks like with some yellow highlights. So I'm actually going to make a virtual copy and bring this point down to add some yellow to the highlights. So now I'm going to select both images. I hit G to show them both, or N to make them large. And you can see the difference between these two. I actually like this one better. So he really pops off the backdrop. It has a mood to it. The sky is toned yellow, so it brings his jacket into the background. And it really looks like a homogeneous image. So let me show you what else we can do with these tools. So there's also a tool called the gradient tool. So the really cool thing about this is you can actually use the gradient tool, way more powerful than Photoshop and faster. So say I wanted to make this window less bright but not affect anything else. In Photoshop you'd have to make a gradient layer and maybe pull the curves down, and it would affect the entire image that you're affecting. It would affect this whole half of the image. If I just use the highlight slider and pull this down all the way and then make my gradient by holding the mouse down and pulling this way, and you can fine-tune it afterwards. And I'm gonna pull the highlights down even more with the white slider. You can see I lowered the exposure of this window without affecting much else. So let me show you another example. We're going to do the same thing here. So the contrast is too much for me, so I want to lower the exposure of this top part of the image. So I'm going to do highlights and whites. Pull it down. And I can even, since it lowered this a little bit, I can even use the shadow slider to bring some of that detail back. And let me show you the before and after. So you can see how this quickly and dramatically changes the image and makes it more moody. I'm going to increase the temperature and add some green. So this looks really good to me. I might mess with the clarity a little bit to see. Yeah, perfect. So there's one more thing you can do with the gradient tool, the brush tool, and the radial gradient tool. So you can actually color tone images. First, I'll show you the gradient tool and how that works, and we'll color tone at the same time. So if I go to this image, you see we have this light here that's overexposed. So I'm going to use the radial gradient tool to make that the correct exposure and to add some yellow tone to it. So if I go to custom color, and we're going to pick some orange yellow because that's what this light would be. And she's kind of illuminated orange yellow. So that makes sense that that's what temperature that light would be. And then we're going to bring the highlights down a little bit. And then pick the center of the light and pull out. And you can see this did like opposite of what I wanted to. But there's this invert key right here, this box. Just click that. And it actually inverts it. And you can see it brought detail back and did a yellow glow around it. I'm actually going to try adding more yellow to it. So you can use this on lights, you can use it for sky, sunsets. There's one more thing you can do with color toning. So with the brush tool, if I wanted to paint certain parts of the image a color, I can really get precise with the brush tool. So this image here, I want to paint the ocean kind of green teal, and I want her shirt to be kind of orange yellow. So if I use the brush tool, I can actually paint those tones in and color tone more precisely. So we're going to start with her shirt. and pick an orange. Now you can change all this stuff afterwards. And I'm just gonna kind of paint freely because we're gonna use this selection mask to really make it precise. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit and try to get this rope. So now I'm gonna go to range color and hit this eyedropper. Now hold down shift and click different places on her shirt and on the rope. There we go. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let me show you what the before and after looks for this. So you can see how I did a pretty good job of toning her, but we need to erase some of this because that color tone isn't, or the auto mask isn't working very well. So if you actually hold the Option key, you're going to be able to erase that mask and that brush. So we're just going to brush in a little bit. I'm going to zoom in. You can scroll up and down on your mouse to pick the brush size and hold Option and just paint around. Looks like we got some down here. Okay, cool. Now I want to tone the ocean. So we're going to actually make a new brush. We're going to go to green, almost like seafoam green. And we're just going to try to paint here. And I can actually go back and change, the intensity of this color. I can change the clarity to make the water pop, and we might do that. So zoom in a little bit and paint here. And around the rope. So you can see you can adjust this color, how intense it is. It's way too much. We just want a little bit. Now let's increase the clarity to bring the water out. And then say I want to make the sky a little bit darker. We're going to use the gradient tool and take the highlights, bring them down. Make sure there's no color. And pull and drag. So one last thing, I'm going to do a color tone on the entire image to just bring it all together. And we're going to use the same colors we used before. So we're going to take the curves, we're going to add a little bit of blue and a little bit of green. And then a little bit of yellow to the highlights. And you can turn this on and off to see how it looks. So this image looks pretty good to me. And you can see we did this all really fast, all in Lightroom. We didn't even have to go to Photoshop. So Photoshop and Lightroom are a little bit different, but Lightroom actually works on the raw image, so you have more information to work from. So that's why I use it in my workflow.